Welcome. This is the second video in a series of 5 dedicated to the creation of scatter and line plots in the KIWI ExploreLive module. I will cover the stratification functionality of ExploreLive. We'll start by talking about the selection of a size by variable. Then we'll talk about the selection of a line by variable or a symbol by variable. And finally, I will cover the functionality of data paneling. I will use a simple PK dataset with a limited number of subjects receiving a single dose. I will use a TSFD for my x-axis and DV for my y-axis. So you can see a group of data points. And I will start by talking about the size by field. This is a field that allows you to select a single variable. I'm going to use weight. The value of this variable will control the size of the symbol that would be displayed in this panel. So the size of the symbols would be defined by interval of body weight. So it can be useful to evaluate the influence of a specific covariable on your concentrations or any kind of relationship between your endpoint and a covariable. I will remove that for now. We will now switch to, oh, no, that's not what I wanted to do. We'll switch to the line by field. In the previous video, we mentioned that selecting join lines are not necessarily super useful without the selection of stratification variable here. The data is essentially connected in order of the x-axis. So the line by design is, or the line plot is something that you can create in a typical spaghetti plot, quote unquote, where every subject is represented by its own independent line. So to implement this spaghetti plot design, you need to select a line by variable. And in this case, I'm going to select the ID variable. And in this case, KIWI ExploreLive will create a line for each subject. I'm going to show that on the Y scale just to get a wider spread of the data. So you can see here we have a single line for each subject with no return actually in between subject. The next field that you may want to use is a field that will control or result in the use of different colors or symbols by value of this variable. So let's say I'm going to use the dose variable. The dose variable is a continuous variable that takes, I think in this data set, maybe 6 or 7 values. So by default, ExploreLive will create a gradient of color representing the change from the lowest value of your color by variable to the highest value of this dose. If you want to use discrete colors by value of dose, you need to coerce that variable into a categorical variable. And this is something that you do in this field. And type in your dose. Now this will update the design. In this case, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different designs. and different colors. If your variable actually has more than 10 unique values, the colors will be recycled, and the line style would stay the same within the first group of 10 values. Line style will change for the next 10 unique values. So this plot is still quite busy and not necessarily super easy to interpret. And to further break down the data, you can use paneling functions. There are two different ways to panel the data. You can select two variables to split the data by row, by columns. So I'm actually going to remove the dosing to illustrate that. Let's say you want to subset by the sex F variable by row. Now all the data for subject with sex F equals 0 are shown in the first row, and the data for sex F equal 1 are shown on the second panel. You could have chosen to use a column by split, and you can actually combine row and column split. So let's say now I'm going to use those. And ExploreLive will split the area and will show all the dose values and all the sex F values in one single panel. So in this case, it's a little bit too busy to my taste, and I will want to use a slightly different option of paneling. I'm going to remove the row and the column, and now my panel by option will appear again. These two modes of paneling using this field or any of those two fields are mutually incompatible. Paneling by dose will create or split the data by one or multiple variables, so dose and sex F, let's say, like we've done in the past. But instead of showing all the panels in one, in the same area, you can control how many panels are shown at one time. So in this case, the default is 2 rows and 2 columns. You can decide to add another column, so you have 6 panels. This is still not representing all the data. You can switch from one set of panel to the next by using the panel group, and it tells you that there are 3 groups of panels. So then you're showing the first one. You can click on the little arrow button or type in the number that you want to display on the in the plot area panel. So this is giving you an idea about how to use paneling, symbol by functionality to stratify your data. Please note that the interactivity is still functional when you're using paneling. You can still click on one data point. It's a little bit more sensitive to the placement of your cursor, but it's still functional when you're using paneling. With that, this concludes the presentation of the data stratification feature. Additional functionality of the scatter plot module are presented in additional videos. Thank you.